So my next guest has been here before. She is one of the highest rated Mastering Midlife podcast episodes ever. People responded to Stephanie Raffelock, her grace, her wisdom, her wit, her insights, like nothing had ever happened before on my podcast. And it was really it was an interesting thing for me to learn how many women listen to the podcast, how many men listen to the podcast and are interested in supporting women, and the depth of the conversation and why it's so important. So when I found out that Stephanie is writing another book that's coming out soon, of course, we're going to have her back. So the official bio is Stephanie Raffelock is the author of a delightful little book on aging, which I really suggest you get. It's a really good book. And the upcoming Creatrix Rising, Unlocking the Power of Midlife Women. I got a chance to read it this week. Really incredible, very practical, so much to do with yourself in that book. She is a popular blogger, public speaker, and she's spoken at different business venues, Breaking the Glass and Charles Schwab. She talks about feminist history and employee relationship, she runs the gamut. But here we're going to talk about your beautiful self entering or in midlife. Stephanie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me back.
I'm so glad. So what I'll share with the audience is we did this podcast last week and I did not press record. I was mortified, 289 episodes, and I didn't do it twice. The other person didn't come back. Stephanie came back. So I really appreciate you and your grace and your forgiveness.
Well, see, I really like you. I think it was good that you didn't push record because it was like this delicious hour of just talking with you.
No, so, we had a lovely conversation.
We had a great talk.
I learned more. Now I feel close to you. So I feel like you and I are just having a conversation. But what that really did give me the opportunity, because you hadn't sent me the book ahead of time last time. And I got, you sent me the book and I got to read about your process and how you're changing the paradigm of women aging and how they look at themselves. So let's just start with, what the hell's a creatrix?
Creatrix is one of the three Greek fates. There was the spinner, the weaver, and the cutter. And the weaver was creatrix. And the word literally means a woman who makes things. I was looking for a word that would replace the word crone, because crone, no matter how you dress it up, it's not a nice word. It means a disagreeable old woman. And so it's not a word that we want to reclaim for ourselves. But the words that I kept coming up with were like sage and warrior. And I think I used transformer at one time, which sort of sounded like, a kid's toy. But those are male words. Sage and wizard are male words. So creatrix was a distinctly feminine word. And as soon as my editor told me about it, I said, wow, that's really it. Midlife women are women who make things. So thus the name, Creatrix Rising.
You said something last week that has stayed with me since we had the conversation, which was, once we're past raising our kids, there's really no reason for us to be here.
That's right.
Now, I know that sounds cynical, but that's not how we were talking about it. There's no practical reason for us to be here. So what we get to do now is create the reason that we're here, create the meaning for being here after raising our kids. So talk about that shift from being needed, because I'm an empty nester now. And for me, it was a while. I actually walked around the house and I'm busy. I have lots to do. Right. So it's not like, and my kids actually lived with my ex-wife. So it wasn't like it was a complete shock to me. But when I realized that every night of the week, nobody needed me. Like the weekends, nobody needed me. Every night was dinner. My husband and I could go do what we wanted to do. And it was like, so now I have a fish tank and 2 rescue dogs, and like, I got to take care of something. But that transition from always being needed to now we have a blank canvas.
Well, and it's twofold. There is the always being needed part of that. And then there's the part of it that says, in my heart and in my mind, I still want to do everything and I still feel like I can do everything. But the truth is the energy begins to wane. So now what do you do with that strip of life where your purpose isn't tied up in taking care of other people and you don't have quite the energy that you used to have. And so there's a Carl Jung quote that I'm fond of that says it's a great privilege in life to become who we truly are. And that, I think, is really the crux of what midlife and beyond is about. It's this strip of time that marches us towards the horizon of eternity so that we become who we truly are. And there is a depth to that and a soulfulness to that and a purposefulness to that. I was thinking this weekend, I got very teary about the whole COVID thing. I'm having such a heck of a time getting a vaccine here. And I thought, this is what women do. We hold a container for emotions. And I was struck by this idea of how badly the world needs to feel right now. That for the last several years, we've had so much normalization of normalization of the numb.
Mm.
And we so much need to feel right now and I think that women can give permission to the society, especially older women, to cry, to mourn, to grieve, to lament. And I really started digging around in the word lament because I love that word. And it's kind of the word that happens after grief. Lamentation is um, being with the memories so that you retain the soul essence of someone that you loved. So they don't completely, it's not completely a loss.
That's
It's
so
like,
beautiful. That's so beautiful because that's not what I thought lamenting was.
well, I mean, I think we kind of confuse lamenting and grief as together, kind of one and the same almost. But lamenting, I think, has a different purpose than grief. Grief is just it's a ragged sorrow for
Mm.
loss. But lamentation is that memory. Like I noticed when my mother died, our relationship didn't end. And it really surprised me. And so part of that relationship that continued was the lamenting of her passing, which meant keeping alive the very best aspects of who she was. I used to think that older people maybe rewrote history, in their later years, but it's not true. What happens is there's this function of the brain or the psyche or the heart maybe to want to keep alive the best of life so that when you look back at life, all of life was an adventure. All of life was a journey. None of it was ever lost.
I'm having a moment here. Like I'm having, because one of the things I've always accused my mother of is making up my childhood. In her later years, I constantly said to her, that never happened. Like, what are you talking about? That wasn't our family. You were just completely making up a whole new childhood for me. And now you're putting it in a completely, I love having a relationship with my mother years after she died and having it improve like this with insight.
Right, right. And I had a similar experience with my mother. It's like, how can you talk about our family like this? We put the D in dysfunction. Um, but what I see now and looking back at my mother and looking back at my grandmother, and it's not the same as romanticizing something as it is really taking the kernel of goodness and truth that was definitely there. And realizing that your mom loved you so much that even while she was alive and talking about that she was pulling the very best that she remembered. That's what she wanted to hang on to, not the times when you were a surly teenager,
Yeah,
or
sure.
or the times when I was a surly teenager,
Or
uh,
or when they were surly parents, right? And like
or when they were surly
I don't want to
parents.
remember that.
Right,
You're
right.
100% right. So I actually have a question about this. So women are leading the way in having emotions and softening in and opening up. But let's take that a step. Let's take a step back, because a lot of the women that I know who are in business are still in a man's world. uh, Even if there's a lot of women in the organization, they still it's still the culturally masculine. So women are having to put on a lot of masculinity to go in and do what the guys do. I can do anything the men can do. My friend Helen Appleby would say is, I can do anything, but my dad didn't tell me that I had to do it differently. So women are going in and they're being masculine and they're trying to figure out how to be powerful women and not masculine women, right? Powerful in their femininity, but still powerful and effective. And so there's that struggle. Now we're moving into midlife, and now they need to get reacquainted with their probably adrenal fatigue and life things bring out, like with midlife crisis, things break us open, and now they're getting reacquainted with their emotions.
Yeah, and I think that this idea of women in business being like men, this is not something new that just happened. When I think back to what the world was like in the 1970s, and women were for the first time really entering the workforce in droves, we all wore, pinstripe suits and big shoulder pads. And I think you mentioned the Melanie Griffith film.
Last week we were
When
talking about
when
how
we
everybody looked like Melanie Griffith, big hair, big
Right,
shoulders.
big shoulder pads and stuff. So, the idea was that to be in business, you would have to be like a man. But really to be in business, you have to become more like a woman. And that's still a learning curve. So I think it's kind of unfair to expect of ourselves in business, which has been male dominated and the purview of men for so long, that somehow we have this balance figured out. That's part of the journey. And the other part of the journey is feeling confident enough that we can speak up in a way that is powerful, but it's not a power over someone. It's not like, oh my gosh, she has the biggest balls in the company. It's not that kind of power.
which
It's
which I've had heard over and over
right.
and over.
Right. But that's not what makes women powerful. What makes women powerful is their ability um, to see another through another lens, to see through a lens that has some emotion to it, to see through a lens that is desperate for fairness, to see through a lens that strives more towards balance. When you look at the paradigm of men in business, what often comes up at the height of a man's career is he's in his mid 40s and he's had his first heart attack.
Right.
It's like, well, what's wrong with this picture? So that's not really what we want to model. But when you go into something new for the first time, it is how we learn is by modeling. The old psychology 101 thing, the baby duck imprints on the mama duck. And so that's kind of what women have done in business. We imprint on the men that we admire and we try to be like them. And kind of without a rule book, we're learning to be um, how we are in business. So I think that it's just a process we're still engaged in.
And that dovetails with men. So that's why this is called the Mastering Midlife podcast. That's why you're talking about midlife. This is a time for introspection, for learning about ourselves. For actually listening more than telling, and evolving, as you said, into who we really are. I would say more into creating who we're going to be, and it's probably a mix of the two. Because I'm always joking about, when people talk about authenticity, the self is made up. I don't know what's authentic anyway, right? I haven't gotten down to authenticity yet, and this is my profession. But so there's a fish swim, right, and birds fly. So we must have an essence that is our authentic self, plus whatever we create and what we're drawn to. But in your book, after a lot of the chapters, there's journaling, which is something that I prescribe all the time. There's going inside, and you have a lot of prompts. So I'm curious, for me, when I had the most powerful journaling experience that I have is a self-forgiveness exercise that I do, where I go in and I allow all the things that I hate about myself or that I did or anything, and I allow myself to forgive those things, and I bring those out on the paper. For you, what is one of the most powerful journaling and self-reflection exercises you have in the book?
Boy, it's been a while since I've looked at the book. I think that the most powerful exercise I have has to do with being in touch with ancestry.
Hmm.
That ancestry follows us. It's kind of like the tail on the comet. If you're the blazing light of the comet, there's this trail behind you, and it's made up. If sometimes I stand in the room and I close my eyes and I can feel my mother behind me, and then I can feel my grandmother behind her, and then behind her is my great grandmother, and then there are faces that are just light and blur and shadow because they're women whose names I don't know, and yet I know that every single one of those women has contributed to who I am, that who I have become isn't mine alone. It's not my journey alone. It's the continuing journey of all those women that stand behind me. So, from that kind of meditative visualization, whatever you want to call it, jumping off then into the memories of mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers and the stories. They're great family stories. Who knows how true they are or authentic they are? It doesn't really matter. If they've landed the place of honor to be a family story, they're worth reflecting upon. And so I think that including mothers and grandmothers is probably the most important and the most powerful in the book.
That's beautiful. One of the ones I loved was also the self-reflection on the self, on the body, on our image. Then there was another one of what values do you want to portray? Who do you want to be in the world? And really to contemplate, and that's that creating piece, which I thought was really, really cool because, for me, when I talk about midlife, uh, I think that the crisis comes from trying to hold on to what was, hold on to youth, hold on to the power, hold on to the fame, hold on to whatever it was, that competitiveness, all the things, the athleticism. I remember I posted a video of the last time I beat my son in an arm wrestle. And my son, who has bulging muscles, he's like, how did this happen? I said, never underestimate determination, because I know the last time the first time I lose an arm wrestle to you, that was the last time I will ever win an arm wrestle. Right. So letting go of that to see what's next is terrifying, because I think what is Brene Brown calls it, the midlife unraveling. It's an unknown, right? You're taking the known and now you're going into, what is this blank canvas?
Right. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking that one of the things I learned about being a writer that has nothing to do with writing is what's called the author's platform. Your PR person will talk to you about it. Your agent will talk to you about it. Well, you have to have a platform. It's your messaging, your branding, blah, blah, blah. Except that I realized that platform is something we all need in our everyday life, because platform asks the questions, who am I? What do I stand for? What am I willing to fight for? What's the message that I most want to put into the world? And the big who am I question, which was prevalent in my 20s as I was going through a time of great seeking and spiritual grappling, has now raised its head again. So I'm about to turn 69 in just a couple of weeks.
You can't see her, but
And
she is so stunning, like jaw-droppingly stunning, that I have to
thank
digress.
you.
I have
And
to digress. No, wait, hold on. I was on a call with a guy named Tim Story, who is his famous life coach, Oprah friend, and all this stuff. And we were talking about age last night, and I asked him how he stayed so vibrant and everything. He said, "I look at someone who's 10 years older than me, like Bruce Springsteen or someone, and I say, oh my God, there's so much life left. So when I look at you, I'm like, oh my God, she's so beautiful and vibrant and all that. That there's so much life left."
this is what 69 looks like.
Yes.
And I totally forgot where I was going with
I
that.
don't care. My crush on you is revealed. So there.
There you go.
So let's regroup. So why did you write the book in the first? Why do you care about this?
I think I've always cared about women in the culture. I had a great sense of fairness and unfairness when I was a young girl, like 10 and 11 years old. I knew that the world worked differently for men than it did for women. And so that's just always been in me. This particular book came about because the last several years, maybe the last decade, I've been very interested in Jungian psychology and mythology and symbols. And
Hmm.
so I was thinking a lot about maiden, mother, crone, and because that's the only paradigm really that I'd heard of. Joseph Campbell said to Maureen Murdoch, who wrote The Heroine's Journey, well, women don't really have a journey. They're just right where they're supposed to be, which, she took some umbrage with. And
Yeah,
So
that
the
makes
only
that makes. I love how someone can be so brilliant and so clueless at the same
at
time.
the same time. So this idea of maiden, mother, crone, I went, God, the gap between mother and crone, crone representing the very last part of a woman's life, it's just too wide. That was the first inclination. There's got to be something between mother and, ready to march off to your death. But then I realized I really was uncomfortable and didn't like the word crone.
Right.
And that even though I had seen certain websites on the internet where women tried to dress it up and say, oh, we're reclaiming it and own your crone, it's like, no, the word entered the lexicon meaning an insult to women. It was never meant as anything good. It was meant as an insult. So let's relegate that word where it belongs. Um, and that idea that there might be another archetype dogged me. And I called this Jungian psychologist that I talk to on a fairly regular basis. And I said, do you think it's just totally arrogant of me with no background in Jungian psychology, let alone psychology, to write about the emerging archetype that I see, that I feel in midlife women? And he said, oh, no, go for it. He said, archetypes change all the time. And for those of you who might be struggling with the word archetype, because I know it's a little nerded out, I think of it as the arc of what's typical. It's a set of qualities. The archetype is a set of qualities. So when I say wicked witch, we all know what those qualities are. If I say warrior, we all have an idea of what those qualities are. The thing about an emerging archetype is, what are the images that come to mind when we say the word creatrix? It's very new. It's kind of like this is a Darwinian moment almost. And so what's the image?
You come to mind, of course, because you created it. But but I know women like you, who are introspective, wise, curious, and really exploring their power of femininity. And when you say creatrix, I know, like, there's a flurry of women that come to mind who are these creative beings who are just powerhouses in life. So that's what I'm starting to think of when I hear the word creatrix.
The image I best love, the woman I best love that embodies this right now is Stacey Abrams for me.
Mm.
And very specifically, here's why. She had designs on being a vice presidential contender. It was pretty commonly known. And then she wasn't. And she didn't miss a beat. She rolled
She's
up
never missed a beat.
no, but
She's gotten
she,
back to whatever she's supposed to be doing.
she rolled up her sleeves and said, where can I serve? Where can I help? And it was like, oh my gosh, that's how I want to be in the world. That's how I want to be, is like Stacey Abrams. So yeah, she comes to mind when I think of Creatrix a lot.
Last time, and again, politics aside, let's take the politics out of it. You also
Yes.
talked about Kamala Harris
Yes.
and why she is such an important archetype for today's young women.
Well, first of all, for a young woman to see the second most powerful person in the world is a woman, it gives them the idea of like, I could do that. And so that's a good thing. That brings more women into the tent. That brings more women into the fold. But what I love about Kamala Harris is that she uses her intellect and her wit as her power, and not in a cutting kind of way, but just a very direct, forthright kind of way. And yet there is this kind of playfulness and softness to her. And I love that scene in the inaugural parade where she drops an earring. And God bless her husband. He's down on the pavement finding this earring, which he then hands to her. And I loved that moment. It's like, yes, this is what I want the world to be. Just like this.
Beautiful. So when does the book come out?
The book comes out on August 24th, 2021, and it's available for pre-order on Amazon.com, which I have a love-hate relationship with.
We all do.
We all do, because I mean, they have done such great service, honestly, during this pandemic. But a couple of places that you can buy the book or pre-order the book that serve the independent booksellers community is bookshop.org and indiebound.org. And you can just type in Creatrix Rising, or you can type in my name. And part of their proceeds goes to promoting and helping independent bookstores.
Beautiful. We'll put that in the show notes so that people can get there. Now, if they can't get the book now and they want more of you and they need more Stephanie Raffelock, how do they find you?
Come to byline-stephanie.com.
And
And there's all kinds of
there's
ways to reach me.
but there's writing there for you, and
Yes.
there's places to find all the wisdom you've shared up until this point. It's
Yes.
also the delightful little book on aging, which is delightful. Honest to God, I remember reading it. It was so good. That's why you're on the show.
Now, can I have just a quick little share and a little brag about a delightful little book on aging?
You get it.
Okay, so BookBub contacted my publisher. For those of you who don't know BookBub, they're a website with about 15 million followers, and they're the ones that offer the book for 99 cents or $1.99, the ebook, for like a 24-hour period, 48-hour period. So they offered my book, a delightful little book on aging, for 99 cents for like a day. And at the end of the day, my husband came into the bedroom and he goes, "Look, your book it's before Matthew McConaughey's book. His book is number 2 in some kind of self-help growth section." And so I have this fantasy now that I can't leave alone, that one day in Austin, Texas, I'm going to bump into Matthew McConaughey and I'm going to say, "Hey, Matthew, remember that time when my book was ahead of yours? I was number 1.
That's so good.
And he will say, "Let me buy you a beer." So that's my fantasy, my brag and my fantasy.
That's awesome. Stephanie, thanks for coming back. Thanks for coming back a third time to chat with me. I'm so glad I get to know you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me too.
I appreciate you. To everybody else, thank you for hanging with us. Thank you for hanging and just having these deep conversations. Pick up the book. A Little Self-Reflection goes miles and miles and miles. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.